Out of the way so I don't knock it over. Call the meeting to order. This is the August 25th, 2021 regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to take just a moment and welcome our newest regular member, Commissioner Odom. Welcome. Item number 2, seat alternate to active required. We don't have an alternate to seat. Item number 3, hearing of residents. Anybody, Tiffany? Nobody. Any emails? Nope. All right, moving right along. Item number 4 is the consent agenda. And we just have a single item on the consent agenda tonight. It's the minutes from the August 11th, 2021 regular meeting. Commissioners, do we need to pull that for discussion? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Commissioner Haynes, and I think Commissioner Ray beat you out just a little bit there, Jimmy. So have a motion to approve and a second. There's no discussion on the consent agenda. I'll call the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Item number 5 is a public hearing, and we have 2 of those this evening. The Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests and replats within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from the staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The Commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the Commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the City Council if necessary. All right, the first one, item A, is ZC 2021-009. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to amend the comprehensive land use plan by changing approximately 42 acres of the future land use map from commercial campus land use designation to the highway commercial land use designation, as well as amend the language for highway commercial, generally located 2,500 feet east of the intersection of Hubertus Road and IH-35 Frontage Road, also known as Kamau Property Identification Numbers 75290 and 75369, City of Schertz, Kamau County, Texas. Megan.
Good evening, Commissions. This is for ZC 2021-009, as stated by Commissioner Outlaw. My name is Megan Harrison, planner. So just to provide reference for the property, so not just for item 5A, but also for item 5B, this is going to be the property that we will be discussing this evening. So the property outlined here in green, so it's 2 parcels, approximately making up 118 acres. For reference, this is IH-35 and then Hubertus Road. Here is the public hearing notice map. We did send out 9 notices on August 13th. At the time of the staff report, we did not receive any responses. However, I did receive one in the mail this week that was neutral to this zone, or ZC 2021-009. So I wanted to spend most of our time on this aerial map for the discussion. I also have the interactive map open on our web as well, so in case I need to, fluctuate between the 2, I can do so. So as it is right now, so this property, just to, provide reference again, this is the property that is in question for the comp plan amendment from the commercial campus to the highway commercial designation. Commercial campus, as it is right now, is essentially designated to intend to encourage development of lower intensity. So having that office, flex office, educational type development at the mid block location. So having that buffer between highway, interstate, and residential uses, and so that's why it is kind of hard to see, so I may actually pan to the internet to kind of show a better representation. I can find my layer list. Our GIS department actually was able to build this in here, so it's much handier now. So the property, again, is zoned that commercial campus designation, and they are wanting to go to highway commercial. Typically, we see the highway commercials along major intersections, so that being, Hubertus Road, for example, Friesenhahn right here, Schwab further down. But the purpose for this was that, we haven't had really much direction from City Council or P&Z as to the land use designation to allow lighter industrial. So most of our lighter industrial, as you can see, there's some kind of at the very further back behind the commercial campus, but then as well, kind of panning back to, I guess, to the south of the property, we do have some industrial, of course, over here as well. So with the highway commercial, though, it is mainly seen to be retail, convenience store, kind of at the major intersections. And with the comp plan amendment from the commercial campus to the highway commercial, staff did kind of have some concerns with allowing the highway commercial to essentially open up to where it could be along all of I-35. So we want to try to keep the designation, as you can see, commercial campus, being across on the, I guess you could say, the southern part of 35, being the buffer between residential and the interstate. So with the amendment to do the highway commercial would essentially almost change, the look of this area. And as we can see, highway commercial is kind of intended to be at those intersections, so it's easily accessed. Whereas at the mid-block, it's not easily as accessed for commercial users. They get off the highway, or if they're coming from this direction, they're going to have to do the turnaround and come back. So staff did have some concerns with allowing the highway commercial, as it could, like I said, it could open up to where we would start seeing that across the highway, and that's not essentially what we would want to intend for that use. Another thing with the comp plan amendment was the language for the highway commercial to be amended to essentially allow certain uses such as light industrial, but also to amend some of the text. So a lot of the issues that staff essentially sees is developments that are, your warehouse type developments. You see those dock doors and trailers, being seen from, essentially on site plans, are being seen from, public right away. And that's always our big, key comment. And so with the text amendment to the highway commercial, we did see that staff did see that it was, a valid point that, providing the dock doors and the trailers to be on the back part of the building, but then also trying to have more of aesthetically pleasing, office warehouse type development. And so with that, the staff did look at both of these, essentially kind of taking it by two. So the comp plan amendment from commercial campus to highway commercial, we didn't feel was as appropriate for this area being located at the mid-block. The other thing was that the text amendment for the highway commercial, we did see that the applicant did make some very valid points. So with that being said, the staff would like to make the recommendation to create a new land use designation. What we would essentially call that is commercial light industrial. So the commercial light industrial land use designation that we would essentially like for this property to be considered as would essentially mirror the commercial campus designation. So still being at that mid-block location, and then, being essentially that buffer between the interstate and any kind of adjoining uses behind it, but to also include that the aesthetics that the applicant did kind of make evident, as well as, increasing the landscaping, having those kind of requirements. So with that being said, let me go back to the presentation. So with that said, again, I'll reiterate that staff, with the comp plan amendment from commercial campus to highway commercial, and the text amendment to the highway commercial, staff is recommending denial. However, staff is recommending the new land use designation, consider it to be called commercial light industrial, to mirror the commercial campus, but to allow that light industrial uses, as well as doing some of the text that the applicant did make a valid point on. So with that being said, the applicant is here to provide a presentation, and then as well as to answer any questions on this request.
Well, thank you, Megan. Sir, if you would, when you step up to the microphone, if you'd give us your name and address or affiliation for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. My name is James McKnight. I'm an attorney for Brown and Ortiz, representing the applicant in this case. And I have the applicant here to answer questions about the use, and actually we have our engineer from Pape Dawson that can answer some technical questions as well. So I may have him jump up, or you can ask him questions as we go.
Okay, could you speak up just a little bit?
Sure, I'll just lean in a little bit better.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so just click it. There we go. So Megan already did a good job of establishing the site, the location and the size, 118 acres. One thing I'm pointing out in this slide is just that the length of our site is about 2,600 linear feet along the access road. This blue area is more specific. This is actually the area that we're requesting for the land use amendment and the zoning, the rezoning. So 118 acres is the site that we're looking at to develop for this light industrial use, but it's actually just that frontage portion that we're looking to request an amendment for. And I think it's key, Megan spent a good amount of time discussing it, but this light industrial use is a very unique use, and we're trying to figure out where it fits, because it isn't exactly this commercial use, and it's not the heavy industrial that you can see in that corner for Cisco and Amazon. It's not that kind of use either. So there's the proposed zoning. You can see the current zoning on the left-hand side, the right-hand side. A portion is GB2. We actually squeezed it down a little bit because that's all we needed for our development. And then the back portion of the site is currently zone M1. So it's already an industrial zoning, and we're just pushing that up just a little more to accommodate the layout that we have currently. And you'll see that in a second. So this is a site plan showing the 6 buildings that we're proposing. And it really is 2 portions of this. The front portion is an office flex, office warehouse type development, and those are the 3 buildings along the highway. And those are the areas that we're asking to be GB2. And then the portion in the back is more of a distribution center. And the vast majority of that site, except for just a little portion of those 2 buildings you can see, already zoned for industrial. So it was just really filling in the gap, according to our site plan, is why we're asking for that to be M1. Now, the comp plan, as she pointed out, well, you've already seen this, but again, that strip there is the only portion that we're asking to be highway commercial. So it's not actually the full 2,000 feet going all the way back. And this is the site plan for the comp plan amendment. Again, it's just the red line is where we would separate and ask for the amendment. And now this is a flyover that we prepared so you can actually see the development that we're proposing. This is not just proposal. We've put a lot of work into this, so hope this works.
Hi, my name's Tim Harrington. I'm with IDV, and we're the developer that's proposing this master plan business park here in Schertz. So the vision here is to have a Class A development in every sense of the word. We've got a number of business parks across the state and have been able to attract Fortune 500 high credit tenants to these business parks. You know, Amazon's, FedEx are some of our clients, and who we envision as being potential users out here for the buildings in the back, the distribution style buildings. The buildings along the frontage, you know, we see those as more service type oriented buildings with office and flex space. You'll see electrical, AC, plumbing, cabinet makers, lighting stores, those types of use type that can provide services to the surrounding rooftops. We do have a lot of interest from potential users already. We've been soft marketing the property. We haven't done a full announcement because we, quite frankly, don't know what the approval process will look like. But you know, we have had a lot of interest and asking, you know, what's the timeline and when we all be able to deliver. So the market is telling us that they want to be here and that these types of users want to come to this area of Schertz, and we'd love to be able to work with you all and deliver it.
All right, thank you.
So, so in doing this, addressing this change of use and zoning, we really have to talk about some of the challenge of the site and why this is more appropriate as a GB2 site and as the highway commercial site as opposed to regular commercial. So one of those is access issues. It might be hard to see from the screen, but we have drainage and an existing access on this side, which creates spacing by TxDOT standards for the next driveway that you can have. We have an existing driveway on the western end of the property, the southern end of the property, that also creates spacing issues. And in the center, we have an on-ramp that also creates a prohibition about where you can have your entrances. So essentially, we're left with two areas that can access this 2,600 linear feet. So you don't have the same kind, for commercial campus, you're usually seeing smaller pad sites, restaurants and smaller retails, but you don't have the access to this site that you normally would for those sites. So it does lend itself to something more of a business park, or even a regional commercial, which you find in the highway commercial land use in GB2 zoning. The next big issue that we have is the topography. Some of that was shown on the video if you could see it, but we have over, I think it's 50 feet of drop, is that right? 80 feet, excuse me, 80 feet of drop from the front of the site to the back of the site, which is about 1,900 feet, linear feet back this direction. And there's a small hill, as you can see for the contours here. So with all of that grade change, you could see it in the video, they showed it a few times, and here is another section showing the different areas and how much cut and fill we have to do in order to level out and actually put the buildings there. A couple of things about that. One is that you can see in the bottom section that the drop is 10 to 12 feet from the highway. So if you have a typical small retail building, those will be about 20 to 25 feet. With that 10 to 12 foot of drop, you don't get much height above. So our buildings are about 35 feet. Again, that office flex space, it's a little more appropriate when you take into account what's needed to actually make the site work. And that's true for the rest of the site as well. We have to tier the entire site back. And as I said, this is already zoned industrial as it is, so we're really concentrating on the front for what is appropriate. Some of the issues or the discussion I want to have about the comp plan itself, it's really, we're in a unique position here. If you can see, the depth of our areas is about 1,900 feet, whereas you can see on the south side of I-35, it's around 600 to 700 feet. That area of commercial campus is just not viable to have that much commercial, especially with the drop we have, but it's just a very large area to try to fill with that kind of medium retail and commercial areas. So that's why we're proposing something like the changes that we made to the comp plan language, is to say there is this other category, this mid-block area that needs more of the highway commercial. It's not just the corners, not just the streets, intersections. One of the things that's noted a lot in the staff report is that that might be a creation of having highway commercial then backing up to residential. Well, you can see on the north side of I-35, you don't have the same residential that you do on the south. We're not backing up to residential neighborhoods. And because of the request that we're making, we're only actually asking for that strip of highway commercial. So there still is commercial campus behind us. However, that's already zoned industrial. So the creation of this abutment of highway commercial to neighborhood just doesn't exist. That's not what we're asking for here. And in the future, even if the text was amended, the city council would still have to adopt those changes. So any danger that might be created by having highway commercial next to neighborhoods isn't taking place in what we're asking for. And you can see that even the intersections that are nearest to us, Hubertus Road has some commercial on the corner, but the next one up, Friesenhahn Lane, does not, Schwab Road does not. I mean, the highway commercial that's shown isn't those large actual intersections that are discussed in the code. So we're looking for, we had a large swath of I-35 that is looking for a little bit of infill of not those, I mean, even Megan mentioned it, people that are not exiting and then having to turn around and come back to those commercial areas. This isn't that prime commercial area, so what do you do with it? Well, you don't want industrial. That's why we're looking for this office park, this Class A office park, and that's where we fill in that gap. This is the definitions between commercial campus versus the highway commercial. We actually do think we fit into commercial campus, to be honest. It says in the text that this category can accommodate light manufacturing and flex office uses in a campus-like environment. That's actually what we're doing, so we do think we fit. However, staff has told us we are more appropriate in the GB2 and highway commercial. So highway commercials, regional scale retail and commercial uses take advantage of the highway frontage. Again, this is where that gap is. If you have the mid-block areas that are not supposed to allow light commercial, so we don't belong there, so you say you belong in highway commercial. Okay, but highway commercial is located at those intersections where you're going to see all the retail. So we don't have light commercial there either. So now that's where the gap comes in, and that's why I believe staff has recommended that sort of in-between category is just for this exact situation. And by the way, for the record, we would accept staff's alternate recommendation. As far as the text that we were adding or proposing to add, it was a way to kind of limit so that if you adopted highway commercial in those areas that you wouldn't want more industrial regional uses, you could still limit it by where you were. So we were proposing allowing the highway commercial in those mid-block areas, but only where it would have small impacts, low impact development like ours. It still keeps in place the buffer, as I've said before. There's still a commercial campus behind us. The concealing delivery vehicles, Megan mentioned it, that we put in language that said you can't, it's not just the trucks parked up front, but you wouldn't have a delivery dock seen there either. Again, that way you can have really a retail look to the front. So it is an office flex space, but it would look like a typical retail building, so you wouldn't see any of those delivery trucks or the docks. And the enhanced aesthetics. We proposed adding glazing requirements. The staff pointed out that they don't have that authority, but we did recommend heights, certain heights to be regulated as well. And still, you could include certain standards that may not be regulated, but could be encouraged. And so that is what we're proposing, as you can see from the flyover. We tried to put in some of those details of the actual building in our renderings. So, as part of our conclusions here, we feel like what we're asking for has a minimal impact along the highway. It really has this feel to it. It fills a gap that's needed. With the text amendment that we are providing, it limits those intensive uses so you don't get highway commercials in places you don't want them. It still protects the single-family uses behind you because we don't have that abutment that could be a danger. We don't have that. And it provides a more diversity of use. You don't just have those strong retail areas or an industrial area. We're providing that in-between space that could provide a lot of tenants, a lot of users. And as I said before, we would accept their alternate recommendation as well. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm here for any questions.
All right, thank you. Well, we'll move on for the time being. We'll move on to public input, and we'll come back to you with questions if we need be. All right, so at this time, I'll open the meeting. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the commission on this subject? And there's the mad rush again, yes. All right. Nobody wants to come up. Nobody wants to talk to us. Going once? Twice? Closed, all right. Commissioners, questions, comments?
I have a couple of questions, if I could. So the GB of what is being proposed, it's going to be going from GB to GB2, correct?
So that'll be the next case that we'll be reviewing. But that is the request from the applicant to go from the GB to the GB2.
Okay, so contingent on that, we're going to approve or deny the request to go from commercial campus to highway commercial. We're going to do that first, and then we're going to move on to the next one to approve GB2.
Correct.
Yeah, it's it's a little difficult to separate these two issues because they're so interrelated, but you're absolutely correct. What we're really looking at with the first item is amending is this the comprehensive land use plan or the sector plan? Or does it really matter?
So it'd be the comp plan that you're amending, and then the text, what the applicant alluded to.
And then they also propose some text, some wording changes in the definitions. Anyone else? Because you know I have a list, so.
Can someone define what office flex is? Maybe an example. Where'd he go? Is that the term you used, office flex?
Sure. So in these types of buildings, what you're going to have is you're going to have an office component along the front of the building, and that ranges anywhere from 10 to 50% or more office in the buildings along the front, and then in the rear you're going to have more of an industrial or warehouse use type, where you're going to have, like, for example, like if it may be like an AC not manufacturer, but AC distributor. Well, they'll have a showroom in the front, and they'll have distribution of the AC in the back. Or maybe you have like a cabinet maker where they'll have like a showroom in the front where people can come in and make cabinet selections, and in the back they're actually assembling the cabinets or shipping and receiving in the back. That is that type of use type. We also see a lot of architects, engineers, and surveyors use these types of buildings where they may have fleet vehicles that they're parking in the rear of the building, and then maybe they have some equipment that they need to store overnight inside of the building, and in the front it's primarily office. So that's that office flex type of product.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
One question for you, Tiff. Or not, sorry, Megan.
Okay.
If we were to go with the staff's recommendation on the commercial light industrial designation, can we do that tonight, make that recommendation? Or is that going to have to be a different item for another meeting?
No, so for staff is that because we have not had the direction, what mid-blocks we want to do, and so the applicant, is taking the leap forward to do this. So I think just to kind of reiterate and make clear is that staff is recommending denial of the commercial campus to highway commercial. However, though, as I alluded in the presentation, staff does have the idea that it may be more beneficial to have a land use designation such as the commercial light industrial, which can be, if depending on how P&Z wants to vote, it can be done. It can be done tonight as part of the recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Megan, could you explain staff, what I want to say here, the rationale behind recommending a new land use versus the amendment, why you favor one over the other?
So I believe with the with how the applicant's proposing it to do the highway commercial, we have that hesitation to, essentially, that could open up to where all of the mid-block areas, I guess, let me go to the map to kind of, I guess, better iterate it as well. So you can kind of think of it as, I guess, 4 sections, because you have from Schwab to Friesenhahn, from Friesenhahn to Hubertus, Hubertus to FM 42, and then, you know, further down. I think, you know, kind of opening that up to allow highway commercial in an area that is usually intended for major intersections, as we can see here on the map, and that could potentially then, you know, transfer over to, I guess you could say, the south side of 35, where we do want to keep that commercial campus designation to be that buffer between residential and their interstate highway. That's kind of where staff was coming from, that, you know, if we allow such a land use as highway commercial to be at this mid-block, is that something that potentially, you know, we could see happening more, which, again, that's why we have not had the direction from City Council or P&Z, but do we want to have that essentially take up the rest of the 35? Whereas the commercial campus is truly designated to be that buffer. And so that's why staff is recommending denial for the highway commercial to be located at where it is.
And Megan, I think maybe to chime in if this helps.
Yes.
Touched on it, but just in case it's not clear, particularly in reviewing this case, but something staff's always been aware of, is the irony of the highway commercial designation that's intended to be at those intersections where you would more likely get retail, service, and office-type uses. Ironically, that designation says, and some light industrial is okay. And in hindsight, that's problematic for staff, that's likely one of those things that we want to amend and say, look, at those intersections where you're more likely to get the retail, service, and office-type uses, let's take out the allowance for the industrial. And that's part of why staff is saying, if you took that highway commercial, now we've got this bigger issue up and down, including at the intersections. And thus, if you're inclined to allow industrial for all the reasons the applicant made, and staff is empathetic, we would suggest you go with this different district that doesn't kind of create that problems for staff of expanding that district. And likely what we would do is, early on as part of the comp plan, make that change so that the highway commercial at those intersections does not allow industrial, and that if we have this new district, then that would be the appropriate thing mid-block, where we have some particular constraints, either topography or access or floodplain, to say where it makes sense to do it this district, different designation. And so I think that's really the big problem we have with just taking the highway commercial, is we need to fix that. And so once we fix that, now they've got another problem, and it doesn't help them. And so this would be the solution, if that helps clarify. I think Megan touched on it. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it did. Thank you. Well, let me start out by saying, or asking, because it's been a while, the comp plan was completed when?
2013?
Okay. Well.
Yeah, 2013.
Because in your presentation, sir, you pointed out that we're not seeing a whole lot of corner development. All right. Well, as I mentioned to Ms. Harrison in our pre-meeting meeting yesterday, and I think Brian's been around long enough to know that at one point, probably around the time this comp plan was done, there were several retail commercial type projects on the radar out there, and they were looking at corners like Hubertus and 35, and that's all, well, as I put it up, Schertz unfortunately is stuck between two black holes, the Forum and Creekside in New Braunfels. And so all of those things that we had envisioned at those corners have basically been siphoned away, because they'd rather, now, So just a little bit of background there, that things have certainly changed since the comp plan, and we're the city finally, council, and I think it's, they've approved funding to redo the comp plan. It's way overdone, or way overdue. There's a couple of philosophical questions, and our statements. Let me get that out of the way, and kind of what we're struggling with, not just for your project, but for other projects in Schertz, is that the comp plan was put together as a consensus document with input from all the stakeholders. And that was the vision, and it was approved and adopted by City Council, and that was our version of what we wanted our city to look like. And what's happened over the years, and you said it during your presentation, what we envision is not what the market wants right now. So we're kind of stuck in a spot now where we have to decide, are we going to stick to our vision, or are we going to let the market drive what Schertz look like? That's kind of the dilemma we're in right now. And I think we kind of covered that one. Our master thoroughfare plan, you know, on the south side there, in front of all those subdivisions, we have a parallel city street running, or a city street running up there parallel to 35. Is there anything like that planned for the north side? And yes, there it is right there. Thank you. So that would provide
So that would provide connection from Friesenhahn to Hubertus,
Yeah.
but then also essentially from Schwab as well.
Well, yeah, what I was looking for, and that shows it to me, is eventually, sometime, these properties would have rear access as well as access off the interstate. That'd give a little better circulation, so that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. A question, are all 6 of these buildings going to go in that GB2 area?
No, sir. No, there are 3 buildings in the GB2 area.
The other 3 would be back in the...
Correct. They're back in the area that's already zoned industrial.
And I wanted to thank you. I've never seen a presentation to fly over like that. But unfortunately, we sit up here, and as much as we like your presentation and we like seeing the pictures, the topic isn't your project. It's whether or not to amend the... And I asked you yesterday, because this afternoon I took a look at the permitted use tables in the UDC, Unified Development Code. And what they're proposing is a by right use in GB2. So where does the comp plan come in? I mean, what authority does the comp plan have over zoning?
I got the look, I think, on that one. So the comp plan has control over zoning in that, in Texas, your zoning has to be done in conformance with the comp plan. That's one of those tests. If somebody comes in for a zoning, first thing we do is say, what does the comp plan tell us? That's not the last thing, but that's the primary thing. So as you know, Commissioner Outlaw, one of the things that we have a problem with, and in addition to this year updating our comp plan, we're going to update our UDC, is there are what I would call inconsistencies in our UDC in the zoning table. And so the problem is, typically traditional zoning, it's sort of a hierarchical level of intensity with some modification sort of intensity. And so normally what you would do is you'd say, well, if you had a commercial district, a general business, it would be less intensive, and noticeably, demonstrably so, than your light manufacturing district. Our GB2 and ML, they're pretty close. And so that's the issue that staff has, is based on the uses allowed in GB2, we have traditionally not granted GB2 zoning in some of the areas typically intended for office, retail, and commercial, and that's really why. So we think in some ways that nomenclature of GB2 is really misleading. It really probably should be ML0 or something like that. It's really more of a like, thus the designation. I think the other thing that staff sort of perceives is that likely, and I will say this, given how developments occur over a longer period of time, particularly a large one, if we're going to make this change, then let's sort of do it right, and let's not hamstring the applicant to the uses that are not likely to sort of come in. And so it's a little bit, I think, of some of the logic of the applicant who was here a few weeks ago with the existing structure, and I can't find something that works. There's a bit of that to it, that if you're going to do something, let's do it well. So if we're going to have multifamily, let's do good multifamily, and I think that plays into it. So that, to answer your question, is why we think the GB2 is problematic in this district, and thus the comp plan designation, because it's really those industrial uses from the GB that they're likely to have. And they were very upfront, and we appreciate that as staff. They're not walking in going, I want the GB to be able to do the retail commercial. You know, they've been honest about it. We're going to do an office manufacturing flex space thing. Those are solidly industrial type uses, and thus the reason.
Okay, so the answer to my question is where we're considering initial zoning or rezoning of a piece of property, we should use the comprehensive land use plan as a guide.
That's right.
As to whether or not that's the appropriate. Okay, got that. Thank you.
And I will say this, if I may.
Sure.
That I think we here in Schertz don't typically get a lot of comp plan amendments, future land use plan amendments coming forward. And I would say less so than other communities I've worked. And so one of the things I think, maybe to clarify staff's position, it's perfectly normal, perfectly justifiable to have someone walk in and say, I want to amend the comp plan because I think it's not viable, not appropriate, something else there. I think where staff looks at it and says, and I think there's probably agreement here, is that we're not just talking about one piece of property. I think in the past where we've had some issues with that, it clearly seems to imply one piece of property, everything else stays the same. And so while we're not looking to amend larger areas, I think Megan made a point to say, you know, if we're looking at this area here, then we are probably need to make sure we're looking at this area here, we need to look at this area here, we need to look at this area here. So the decision we make tonight, even though it may just be this amendment here, for similarly situated areas, which in this case is the north side of 35, because the south is a very different character, mid-block, then likely what staff would say, if we do it here, then we would be open to doing it those areas as well, so just keep that in mind. I think likely the applicant would say, yeah, they probably got the same challenges we do, they may have limited access, maybe some factors slightly different, but that would be the case. So you don't want to just do one parcel, and thus staff wants to be clear, if we do this, it kind of sets the stage for these mid-block sections going forward.
And not a question, but a comment, again, from your presentation, and the fact that, yeah, if I'm driving north on 35 and McDonald's is sitting over on the southbound side, I don't want to exit, cross over, come back, and then when I leave McDonald's, I got to come back around. And we see some of that already when you look at what's developed between 3009 and Schertz Parkway, like Denny's. I love Denny's, but I don't frequent it a lot because it's too hard to get to for me to cross over, and then, you know, so I think the comments about what kind of developments are mid-block, you know, those are very good, and a lot of good points in your presentation. But again, I think the concern is, as Mr. James just pointed out, if we do this here, you know, a lot of people don't like the word precedent, but that's kind of what you do. And let me ask one more question. Because there was a bit of dilemma when I was reading the staff memos that they recommend denial of the plan change, but they're okay with the zone change. And I think the rationale was then that's more of a specific, although once again, as a commission, we're talking specific zoning, not a particular project. And once we change that zoning, anything in that list can be built in there. So it's something we're a little sometimes leery to do. I'll come right out and say I like the idea of the new land use designation rather than approving the amendment to the current one. Let's do a new one. But my question then is, what happens to the applicant's project? If that new land use isn't going to come along until the new comp plan, what does that do to them in the meantime?
So then wouldn't it be something that would take place, so once city council reviews this, because it'll be heard by city council, then once city council, if they do approve it, then it would essentially be set forth immediately?
That's right. So with the way the notice was done, what the commission could do, if you look at this and say, they make some valid points, talked about the limited access, how much demand is there really going to be for retail commercial now with changes to internet sales and things like that, all the factors. What the commission could do is say, we would recommend approval of the new land use designation category be added to the comp plan, and that this section of property be amended to that designation. And that's what would go to council. You know, you never predict with council, but likely what they would do is not deviate back to the highway commercial. They'd either look at it and say, yeah, we agree with Commission P&Z's recommendation, let's do that. And so that change, if you went with that new designated being added to the plan, which we can add a brief designation to, easy enough with this, we don't have to wait for the comp plan to happen and it's done. And I will say, you know, staff talked a lot about this, the value of, well, we're going to kick off the comp plan as soon as our committee starts meeting and we settle the res thing. But one of the challenges in a comp plan is you're dealing with 100, 200 issues. And so sometimes you have to skim those, which is why we're saying let's settle this issue of residential form now, where when we can focus on it with the committee. And to some degree, I think is the argument to make, we can talk about this issue of north side of 35, mid-block, how do we feel about industrial, and just focus on it now, and maybe give it a bit more attention than it would get as part of all the other conversations with the comp plan. Because frankly, likely one of the things we're going to get into a big question on the comp plan is this designation up here of agricultural. To me, that's something we're probably going to spend more time, is how viable is that than this. So again, from a staff perspective, there's probably some merit to thinking about this issue solely now, and if we want to do it now going forward.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Commissioners, anybody else have anything?
Did anybody capture what Mr. James said?
Well, he answered my question was, would we have to wait until the new comp plan completion in order to see this new land use designation? And his answer was no. If we as a commission were to recommend that to council, council would have the option of saying, yeah, we like that, and approve it, and it would then become effective. We wouldn't have to wait around for the comp plan.
Yeah, that was my question, and he answered it very succinctly and on point, but I didn't write any notes down for a motion. But I have another question. On that map, it looks like our land use designations are aligned with property lines. Are these mushy? Can they move back and forth, or are they stuck the way they are?
So,
Because and the reason I'm asking is, what's the bright orange again?
so this one,
Yeah.
that is the highway commercial designation.
I think some of these highway commercial designations are not small, are not big enough to put anything of value in there, in my opinion. Some of them are kind of small. And that's why I asked, are these lines flexible?
So,
It's conceptual.
yeah, so the line is conceptual, but I will say, one of the things that, again, we've debated as a problem that we did not do, that we will do this comp plan and future land use plan, is we will look at those property ownership boundaries. Now, sometimes we will choose to ziggy-zag to follow, because that's the ownership. Other times, it's too much property, and we're going to cut a piece of property. So, again, it's conceptual in that you've got some ability to tweak it a bit, but fundamentally, I think the concept is that we're not bringing industrial all the way down to the frontage road. And so this proposed change goes beyond that conceptual tweak is the issue. So the answer is, some ways we follow property lines, some we don't. It is conceptual, but, you know, fundamentally, the way staff would look at this is intended to say, look, only half of the property generally between 482 and the frontage road is designated this, as opposed to the agricultural conservation. But whether it's right here or right here, that can flex, but not all the way up and down.
And another question, as far as we know now, the construction on 35 is going to stop at 1103. Is that as far as we know now?
The I-35 next project is going to stop at 1103 as far as we know now. But those who drive up and down are driving through construction north of 1103 now. But yeah, I-35 next, which is the double-decker, stops at 1103.
And further north on 35, the stuff they're working on now, that's a park and ride?
So the old
Rest
rest stop is a park and ride facility, conjunction with VIA, but anybody can use it. So yeah, it's a park and ride facility.
Anyone else? So what I think we have is we have, we're looking to make a recommendation to City Council. They have final approval. And I think we have three options. And those are, we can recommend denial. We can recommend approval as submitted, which includes the textual changes to the comp plan. Or, as Megan pointed out, I think the third option is we could recommend approval of the, and I'm not sure how to word it, but basically we would say, we recommend you approve it with approval of the new land use plan. It would, and do those sound, that sound like the three options we have?
That is the three options.
Yes.
At Megan off. And I will say this, my impression, the applicant, and they can nod with this, that third option, the new district staff created, would allow approval of the zoning the applicant is requesting. So my impression from conversation with the applicant is they're not trying to disrupt things. And so if staff is saying, look, rather than do the second one, you like the third one better, they're perfectly fine with that. And so I would almost say, unless somebody comes up with some reason none of us think about, you really have the first and third option, either denial or the addition of the new district and the change in designation.
Okay, everyone okay with that? If anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the City Council denial of CZ 2021-009 and recommend amending the comp plan to include commercial light industrial designation using staff recommended verbiage and amending this section of property to commercial light industrial.
So if I can clarify the motion, Commissioner, and maybe
Yes, no, go ahead.
if what you're recommending ultimately is approval of the amendment to the comp plan to create the
Commercial light industrial.
industrial and designation of that, then your motion would be to recommend approval of the amendment to the commercial light industrial and the designation of the property to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then you would take out the recommendation
Deny.
for denial.
So
As recommended, because now I'm starting to get confused.
if we don't deny CZ 2021-009, then
We recommend approval of the new land use designation as recommended by staff. Because I was starting to get confused with some of the words, because we don't want to approve the applicant's
Right.
recommended amendment. We want to, I'm saying we want to recommend approval of staff's recommendation.
Yeah, but if this helps, fundamentally what you either are doing is recommending denial, which is don't change anything, or you recommend approval of something. Your approval is just not what the applicant's initial request was, but once we publish the notice and do what we do, you can approve something different that's not crazy, crazy extreme.
okay.
This isn't. So that would be technically to get what you want. If that helps, it can be confusing.
Okay, so I want to make a motion then to approve CZ 2021-009 with the caveat that we are recommending a comp plan amendment to include commercial light industrial designation using staff's recommended verbiage and amending this section of property to the commercial light industrial.
All right.
Correct.
Second, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Ray? All right, I hope Tiffany got all that, so. But I got a thumbs up over here that Mr. James thinks we're on the right path. All right, so basically we have a motion and a second to recommend that City Council approve this case with approval of the new land use plan as suggested by, those are my words, not Mr. Odom's words, but I think that's the gist of it. Yes, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Call for the vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. 5 ayes, none opposed. None opposed. That motion passes. Yeah, well, it is, yes, sir, but thank you for that. All right, item 5B. ZC 2021-006, hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 42 acres of land from General Business District, GB, and Manufacturing Light District, M1, to General Business District 2, GB2, and Manufacturing Light District M1, located approximately 2,500 feet east of the intersection of Hubertus Road and IH-35 Access Road, also known as Comal County Identification Numbers 75290 and 75369, City of Schertz, Comal County, Texas.
Good evening, Commission. Megan Harrison, this is for ZC 2021-006. Like Commissioner Allal stated, this is for the General Business District and Manufacturing Light Zone Change to General Business District 2 and Manufacturing Light. So as we've already seen, this is the property that is in question. So just to provide a very quick reference, here is the public hearing notice map. We did send out 9 public hearing notices on August 13th. We have not received, up into this meeting, we did not receive any in neutral, in favor, or opposed. Here is the zoning exhibit, so if I need to, I can zoom in a little bit closer, but here is in red, this is the current zoning lines for M1 to be the back, GB to be that front. So essentially that GB is what actually goes all the way up to 35. However, the applicant is requesting to do the M1 to bring that forward where this new blue line is, and from that portion to 35 would be that GB2 designation, which again, as the applicant did allude, that would allow that flex office type development within that land use or within that zoning district. So our GIS department did provide essentially a current and a proposed zoning map. So as you can see, again, just kind of as a zoning exhibit did illustrate, but this with the kind of our zoning colors, I guess you could say. Our M1 being in that back and our GB being in the front. The applicant, again, is requesting that GB2 be along the I-35 instead of GB, and that M1 coming up a little bit closer. So with the recommendation from the P&Z Commission on the last item for the commercial light industrial land use designation, staff is making recommendation for the GB2 and M1 zoning district. The applicant is here still if there are questions, but if not, I can answer anything that you have.
All right, thank you, Megan. Would you like to address this again? Okay.
Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion. Again, James McKnight for the applicant. Just the part about the GB2, just, you know, I've gone through and looked at the different uses. You did talk about the different uses because it's zoning. You're not just looking at a project, you're looking at the zoning and everything that it applies to it. And if you look at the table, you're only looking at about 20 uses that would then be allowed that are not allowed under GB. And under that, I only found maybe 11 that were sort of viable for the property that we're looking at, not just because of the topography changes, but because of the width of the site. That GB2 is only about 400, I think 450 feet, and the rest of it is industrial. Also, the limitation, the fact that it is next to an industrial use already, or industrial zoning already, kind of limits it as it stands today. So I just wanted to say that although it does open it up to other uses, one, we have a very strong project in mind. I've spent a lot of money to try to make this project work. But two, there are limitations to the site and to our request that would provide at least some comfort in the fact that it doesn't really open it up to all of these uses. It really just, we're looking at these light industrial uses primarily. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me shuffle some papers here. Okay, so once again, this is a public hearing. I'll open the floor for comment, public input. Anybody? No? All right, we'll close the public portion of that, and commissioners, it's up to you now. Questions, discussion? Let me throw something out there. Again, it goes back to history. You know, my recollection of a lot of the zoning that took place as Schertz grew, if you look at the zoning map, we've made a couple of changes lately, but primarily when they first started looking at 35, the frontage was, I think, except with one or two exceptions for existing uses, they zoned it GB because they didn't want certain things there. They didn't want car dealerships. They didn't want mobile home sales. You know, so some of those 20 uses, council at that time didn't want to see those along the interstate, and so that was, I think, not necessarily the only reason, but that was one of the factors as to why the property is zoned the way it is. And, you know, it wasn't that long ago. Now, it was for an existing use, which is a little bit different, but again, it's our vision versus market. And as we have found out over the last year or so as P&Z, that a lot of attitudes have changed on city council. They don't see things the same way the folks that initiated these actions did. So I did want to ask how this relates back to what we just did. Because again, as I asked and you answered, we should be using the comprehensive plan as one of the factors to consider as to whether or not the zoning is appropriate. And given the current land designation, GB2 may not be appropriate. So where I'm going with this is, should we consider some kind of a conditional approval of the zone change based on whether or not council adopts that new land use? Okay. Because if let's just for hypothetical sake, say we recommend approval of the zone change. Well, now, if council were to also approve the zone change, you know, now we've opened it up, you know, to those, well, I guess then you'd probably start haranguing them about outside storage and some other stuff. But you kind of see where what I'm looking at here. Should we recommend outright approval of this, or would it be more appropriate to contingent based on their decision about the new land use? What do you think, Mr. James? See, I love putting him on the spot. See?
Answer the same thing. So I think it's inherent that P&Z's recommendation on the zoning is contingent, kind of why staff changed ours, on approval of the comp plan. And so when it gets to council, council may get up on the comp plan item, which will come first, and say, thanks staff, thanks P&Z, we don't want to change the comp plan. And then I think inherently everybody go, well, if you don't change the comp plan, then you don't change the zoning. So we think you're okay going with just a recommendation on the zoning. Inherent in that is we're all kind of saying, but council, if you don't change the comp plan, then yeah, we assume you'll deny the zoning.
All right, thank you. All right, commissioners, anyone else have anything?
I had one question. Looking at the permitted use table, what specifically is not permitted under GB that they're going to be using that needs GB2?
Make sure I read this use correctly. It's office, warehouse, distribution center. That is the use that we're going for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And that is not allowed, that's not a by right use in GB?
Correct.
Right, okay, thank you. Well, you had it right there.
There's a bunch of them.
Yeah, yeah.
You can kind of get lost in
You do, yes. All right, commissioners, you guys have anything? No? Richard? No? All right, so also, this is also a recommendation to City Council to either approve or deny ZC 2021-006. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of ZC 2021-006.
All right. The new guy jumped right in there with both feet. Thank you. All right, so we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
That was that end, okay, from Commissioner Broad. Any further discussion, questions? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. 5 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your input there. Thank you.
Good luck, Mr. McKnight.
All right, moving on to item 6, and items for individual consideration. 6A, PC 2021-029, consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the Parklands 2 subdivision, units 2 and 3, an approximately 21-acre tract of land located approximately 4,500 feet east of the intersection of Frobese Lane and Parklands Way, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas.
Good evening, Commission. Megan Harrison. This is for PC 2021-029 for the Parklands 2, Units 2 and 3. So just to provide reference, the property here is outlined in green. Here is the Parklands 2, Unit 1, and then the rest of Parklands subdivision to the northwest of the property. Here's the preliminary plat, is set in 2 pages, but the property is going to be established, essentially, it's 21 acres, approximately 21 acres of land that's going to establish 78 single-family residential homes. With that, there is going to be water and sewer provided through an 8-inch line that will stub for future developments. And then as well, the property sale kind of go into the different lot sizes, because this one does have the 3 different lot sizes. So the SF 7200, they are proposing to do 36 of those. For the SF 8200, they are proposing to do 17, and then the SF 9000, they're proposing to do 25. So again, this one is set in 2 pages. So here is the first part of it, and then the second part of it. So this one is going to, the development is going to be designed to have 2 points of access, which will be constructed through Parklands 2 Unit 1. So I did do some kindergarten, I guess, cutting and pasting. So if I need to, I do have a way to put it on the monitor if we do need to kind of see kind of how it's going to lay out. But this development is going to have 2 points of access through Parklands 2 Unit 1, which will be constructed prior to Units 2 and 3. The drainage was looked at by the city engineer and was approved. The sidewalks for the development will have to be up to the city of Schertz standards, as well as the roads as well. So with that being said, the preliminary plat is consistent with the applicable requirements, ordinances, and regulations. It has been reviewed by Engineering, Public Works, Fire, and Planning, and therefore staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat for Parklands 2, Units 2 and 3. The applicant is here in case there are any questions, but if not, I can answer them the best I can.
All right, thank you. Commissioners? Could you back up to the aerial where we saw, yeah, right there? So what I'm looking for, and not that, please don't be offended, I'm searching for those 2 points of access. And I can see them on the plat, but what I'm looking at back up, because the area in green is the platted,
Is the property in question tonight?
the area just to the left of that, that's Unit 2?
So this is Parklands 2, Unit 1.
Okay, Unit 1.
So the property outlined in green is Units 2 and 3. So they're doing them in combination together.
So again, I'm just trying to, in my mind, find 2 connections between Unit 1 and Unit 2. And I can see one up there at the top.
So you have this one here, and then it's hard to tell.
Okay, it's covered up there with text.
Yes, it's.
Alrighty. And then I've got, so this light blue outline is coming in from from what's currently being developed. So you've got the one street that comes in up there in that top left corner. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking back at Unit 1. I'm trying to make sure, I'm trying to get all the way through to Unit 2.
Correct.
And so I've got that street up there that comes in the top left, and so then the other access is down here. They'll actually construct that when they put in Unit 1. They'll make that connection back into the...
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. And thank you for this. I think I've commented before, it's... we tend to look at these things in little pieces, and sometimes it's hard. It's nice to be able to zoom out and look at the whole project and see how it all interconnects. So thank you for including this one. Anyone else? All right, this one is on the agenda for our action. and we can either approve or deny. If someone would like to make a motion.
I move that we accept PC 2021-029.
Okay, I believe that was a motion to approve from Commissioner Haynes, correct?
That is correct.
Correct.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Ray. Do we have any further discussion or questions? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 5 ayes, none opposed, that motion passes. Item 6B, PC 2021-030, consider and act upon a request for approval of a master development plan for the Saddlebrook subdivision, an approximately 218-acre tract of land generally located 4,500 feet east of the intersection of FM 1518 and Lower Seguin Road, City of Schertz, Bexar County, Texas.
So this is, again, as illustrated, is for PC 2021-030 for Saddlebrook Subdivision Master Development Plan. Megan Harrison, planner. I know eventually y'all will probably get really tired of me standing up here and be really excited when Emily comes back.
Yeah,
But
at least we get to sit down.
until then, so this is, again, as said, this is for the Saddlebrook subdivision for the MDP. The property here is outlined in green as it stretches essentially all the way and then back down to Lower Seguin Road. So the applicant is proposing to master plan approximately 218 acres of land zoned planned development district to establish 633 single-family residential lots. So the PDD was approved this year in March by the City Council. So with the PDD, they are proposing to do 13 units. However, 1 through 10 will be residential. Unit 11 is proposed to be that commercial. So as you can see right here where the proposed FM 3009 extension would be in Lower Seguin. Unit 12 would be the proposed lift station, and then Unit 13 is proposed to be some drainage. The property does have several lot designations, you could say. So one of them being the SF55. That would allow a minimum area of 6,875. The SF60 would allow the 7,080 square feet. The SF70 would allow a minimum lot size of 8,260. So all of those, so the SF55, the 60, and the 70 would follow the current zoning, base zoning of the R1 designation. Also, I know we've seen this, it's been some time, but there are some garden home district as well, kind of up in the Unit 10 area, and those would follow the garden home zoning designation within the current UDC. The property would have 2 points of access for each unit, but also it would have various points of access throughout the whole entire subdivision. The water and sewer would be constructed and be City of Schertz water for the 8-inch line to be stubbed for future development, such as the sewer would be as well. The drainage was reviewed by the City of Schertz Engineering Department and was reviewed by them and looked over and was approved. The sidewalks would need to be in conformance with the City of Schertz standards. So with this development, as you were aware when we were going through the zoning and all of that, that there is that extension of the roadway. So the applicant is going to be responsible for dedicating right-of-way and constructing local streets. So these local streets, such as being, within each unit, is going to be that 50-foot right-of-way. So within the units themselves. The applicant will also be responsible to dedicating right-of-way for the principal arterial with a 10-foot future dedication, which will be that 120-foot right-of-way to ensure the entire subdivision has access to public right-of-way. They will also be responsible for dedicating right-of-way and constructing collector streets for the 60-foot right-of-way designation to ensure that each unit and entire subdivision has public access. So with that being said, staff is making a recommendation for the master plan development, which is consistent with the applicable requirements, the ordinances, and regulations. It has been reviewed by engineering, public works, fire, and planning. And so staff is making a recommendation to approve the Saddlebrook subdivision master plan. The applicant is here in case there are any specific questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners?
What's the plan for that section of Raft Burnett up there on the upper left? And part of the reason I'm asking this is if this subdivision goes in, well, it's going to go in, and let's assume that the school district builds another school down there, and there's going to be more residential all around this place, that the intersection, or well, it's not really an intersection, but where Schaefer Road makes that 90-degree turn and the Raft Burnett gravel lane or whatever it is, and the proposed what might be the extension of 3009, that could be a major intersection. And we should plan for such. And the intersection itself is not part of this development, but we as a city ought to be looking at that for the future to make this into a major intersection. And for the time being, what's going to happen to Raft Burnett? How am I going to get out of this subdivision if I hang a left and want to get to Schaefer Road?
So the property would be responsible to, develop their portion of Ralph Burnett. However, Brian, would there be, I'm not sure if from the portion from the subdivision to Schaefer Road.
Because if this is going to be one of our points of access, we need more than a sidewalk.
Sure. So yeah, no, don't disagree. And so, again, we've talked about this before. So the applicant will have to improve their section. They've done a TIA. I can't recall whether or not there were any kind of minor intersections improvements done down at FM 1518 or not. But you are correct. One of the issues is we cannot require the applicant to build that unimproved section of Raft Burnett. So much like we get down in Laura Heights, in that area down there where we have subdivisions built, the roads aren't improved, those residents get down there and start going, wait a minute, these roads aren't in great shape, and we then start getting those demands. And then the issue is, and you've all brought it up before, where do we get the money to make the improvements? That is the challenge that we have as a community. That's why we have a roadway impact fee ordinance. But as I have said before, in a growing community, growing as fast as we are in particular, and given the fact that development occurs where it occurs, we will have problems with roads not being improved for a significant period of time, longer than we would like, till that gets improved. There is not a solution to that in Texas. So again, for example, as some folks live with it, the good news is AMPO on Monday, I think, recommended approval of the additional 18 million, something like that, for FM 1518 to do the whole thing. But how long have we had Crossvine, Willow Grove, Rhine Valley, Halley's Cove, everybody else out there driving up and down this two-lane road, and good luck at Schaefer if you get stuck behind somebody trying to make a left. That is just inherently the problem we have. It's exacerbated by how fast we're growing and the regulations we operate in under the state of Texas. So again, don't disagree with you, it's a problem. Don't disagree, we will hear residents show up here. All we can do is try to make sure we're thoughtful about it, but we will be behind the curve in doing that. So again, as some of us chatted the other night, much like the city is happy to get our first half, about 5.2 million of the 9 million in the first ARP funds, which are really water and sewer, fingers crossed that the other infrastructure bill that's pending, which is for roads, gets approved, because that money will trickle down and help us. But it is just a challenge we face. Again, as bad as we have it, if you live in New Braunfels, you probably have it worse, because they're growing even faster, have those same issues. It's just the way we operate in Texas. We like a lot of the property rights stuff, but it means we have these issues with infrastructure. The difference is, and you certainly know this, Commissioner Bro, if you don't have water, you can't develop at all. If you don't have sewer, you can't get approval for a septic, you can't develop at all. Roads are a bit of a different deal. You can make do with substandard on them, and unfortunately, we have to here.
Well, is this, I can't remember, is this asphalt or what is this at the moment?
Yeah, it's asphalt, I guess you could call it that. It was asphalt at one point. It's not in great shape. The applicant's aware of it. Again, we're all aware of it. It is not in great shape. And likely, much like we're hearing down south off Bainig and File, that will get torn up as we go forward. So certainly what we would like to do is work with the applicant about construction access, where that comes in, things like that, so we don't exacerbate it any worse than it is. Good news is, in some degree, it's in their self-interest, because if it gets torn up worse while their development's under construction, doesn't help them sell homes. But again, I would bet you somebody who really wants to live there is not going to be dissuaded by that.
I just can't see building 633 residential units with an access point like this. I mean, I know you guys are saying it meets all the rules and it meets all the qualifications, so our hands are tied, but it's going to be embarrassing. And like you said, how do we fix it? We should have a way of fixing this. It's going to be embarrassing opening this development up, and that's the grand entryway.
Well, of course,
It's ridiculous in my mind. I got another question. Looking at the spot where the lift station is going to be, and looking at the prevailing winds, prevailing winds are going to carry that lift station, if there are any odors in that lift station, directly down the main street from one end of that place to the other. I don't know if there's any relief from that, but just to let everybody know. That's all I have.
well, this, what I started to say was, this is the same discussion we had with, sorry, senior moment, it was there and it's gone.
It's the same discussion we have on virtually every residential.
No, well, even more so though, Brian, up north, and what was the previous,
Cypress Point Parklands with regard to
Parklands is the
Green
one,
Valley.
yeah.
We're having the
where-
same issue there.
Where they were back in there building this massive development called Parklands, and you had this little no center stripe, barely wide enough for two cars, what I call a cow trail. And you know, again, even more so there, because that was the only access to where they were selling the homes.
Yep.
The issue here is they're going to start in the front off of, that's Lower Seguin Road. So Raft Burnett doesn't really become an issue until they get, you know, started there, you know, probably back Unit 9, Unit 10. Is Raft Burnett a public street?
It's not in sections, and so again, the applicant has the ability to dedicate their portion, and so likely that will be an issue. So this has extra challenges. So again, I look at Commissioner Haynes, you're not hearing me stand up saying this won't be a problem. I'm telling you the opposite. But it's similar in some ways to Big John Lane, ironically, that we had on Parklands, and what's the
Right.
status of that and where those access easements. Yeah, this is just the problem that we have, which is we can't make developers go, you got a developer right next to this project and build those roads.
No, I get that, Brian. What I'm really looking for is when it's built out, and we have units 9 and 10 back there, and we have that outlet onto Raft Burnett, is that section of Raft Burnett from there to,
Shaker Road?
Yeah, Shaver Road. Is that available for public use, is really where I'm driving
The
at.
applicant will have to demonstrate that, so let me be
Okay.
clear. So the applicant will have to demonstrate that it serves as an additional point of access
Okay.
to get there. We've had this conversation, they've explored it.
Yeah.
Again, they understand the concept, and so, yeah, what we can't have is, if a guy can put a barricade right at the edge of their property and we can't get a fire truck, it doesn't work
Okay, got you.
going forward. As I understand it in conversations, the rights to that access allow for that to occur. We'll certainly verify that when it comes in with legal.
Okay, and then,
Verify that first before we approve this?
It's
Or
not
is it-
germane to it because they have to maintain the access at phasing.
so it probably won't become, maybe, and I don't know whether, it all depends on circulation, but I would imagine at some point, trying to plat Unit 9 or Unit 10, that's probably where the issue would come up.
Yeah. And that then
Somewhere.
assumes that this piece hasn't come in by then and connected
Yeah.
with the stub out, and we have a way up through there. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the concern. It's certainly worth noting. We've had this conversation. To some degree, though, we don't have the ability to say, you've got to solve that necessarily today, because again, they don't have rights to plat unless with the platting, they meet all the requirements.
Okay. Is that good for you, Commissioner Brown?
Oh, I still don't like it, but
Okay.
that doesn't matter.
And then I think, Megan, you mentioned yesterday that between staff and the developer, you guys made some tweaks to the phasing to make sure that streets would be,
Yes,
the
so,
access would be there.
yes, so staff, when we looked at it for the last time before we sent it back to the applicant, before the formal application, staff worked with GIS just to ensure that what they were proposing for their phasing lines for each unit, such as, addressing was going to be appropriate. And so the applicant, of course, took our recommendation to change some of those phasing lines that would be better suited for addressing and make it more clean. And so that was the only, I guess you could say, tweak to the plan that you're seeing tonight, was the
Okay.
phasing lines to be more clean.
And it's, in looking at it, it reminds me a lot of the Parklands, where we have to get very creative to find two points of, for instance, I'm looking at Unit 7, and there are two. One is kind of the main street, and the other one is you make a right and you come back in through the knuckle, so, but see, I can see that when Unit 8, we get to Unit 9 and 10, there's only one connection back into Unit 8, so they're going to have to do something there at the other end, like they're showing. I wanted to clarify what we call the 3009 extension, the big wide thing that runs through the middle of it. They are not going to be required to construct that, correct? Just dedicate the right-of-way. Okay. What about, are they going to do anything for cross-access? In other words, where we see streets crossing that proposed 3009 extension, are you planning on doing those?
So here,
I'm sorry.
For a moment.
Well, yeah, I mean, if when you go up here, say, where's the main one? The street that's right there between Unit 4 and Unit 6, and you see that big, nice intersection on both sides with the 3009 extension. So is that going to be, are they going to construct that crossing?
They're constructing 3009. So, and again, let me be clear, we had this conversation.
Yeah.
We call it we call it the 3009 extension.
Right.
It is not a TxDOT designated
Right.
road. It'll be a city street when it goes in. So the applicant, per the subdivision ordinance, is required to construct their portion where adjacent.
Oh, okay.
And so they will be building this section. Now, I will say, we are doing an agreement with them on roadway credits. It's not in the impact fee service area, it's being amended. But yeah, the plan is to have them build this, which gets us that section.
Okay. Well, I thought I asked that question, and you were shaking your head no back there, so. Oh, you were? Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. All right, well,
They're gonna build that, you'll have that access up and down there.
And so the cross-access then, all right. And the last question I have for you, and I hate to use the word significant, but we don't need to get into the weeds, but any significant changes between this master development plan and the concept plan that was shown to us in city council?
No.
Okay, so in other words, what I'm looking for, they didn't change the number of lots or anything like that, okay?
No.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, who picked Pink Lemonade Lane? Did you do that? There seems to be more than one theme in the names of the streets in here. It's just, I don't know, just comical. I found Pink Lemonade Lane. That's weird.
All right, commissioners, once again, this is on the agenda for our action to either approve or deny. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve PC 2021-030.
Second.
I have a motion to approve, a second from Commissioner Odom. The motion was made by Commissioner Ray. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Aye.
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 I still don't like it, but aye. All righty. So, moving on, item 7, requests and announcements. A, request by commissioners to place items on a future P&Z agenda. Anyone have anything? Item B, announcements by commissioners. Anything, gentlemen? Announcements by city staff.
You thought you were done with me. So we do
Well, you
have...
got to sit down for a couple
I had to
minutes.
sit down, yes. So as you had seen, so this is the QT 4032, the SUP and site plan. So they did come in for their formal application. It was administratively approved by staff. So this is at 8.5 acres off of Schwab and 35, and is proposed to be a 7,318 square foot convenience store with gas pumps. The other one is the 200 FM 3009 cell tower SUP and site plan. This is for the 105-foot monopole cell tower on the 0.056 acres of land at the FM 3009 and 78 location. The next one is the Hidden Grove minor plat. So this one is at Main Street and Randolph and then Exchange. This one was administratively approved by staff. This is a 0.329 acre tract of land. I have no other announcements.
All right, thank you. Item 8, information available in the P&Z Commission packets. No discussion on those items. And that brings us to item 9. There being no further business for the commission, this meeting's adjourned.